All right, yesterday was MLK Day. Lots of Democrats, of course, using MLK to promote their agenda. But this clip from Biden, which actually is from like a year ago, went viral again as people were kind of reminiscing about it. And Biden is criticized for saying what he says here. It's a brief clip. He's criticized for this. A lot of people on the right, of course, criticizing him. But I actually agree with him. Let's play the clip.
But even Dr. King's assassination did not have the worldwide impact that George Floyd's death did. Okay,
so there you go. Martin Luther King's death did not have the worldwide impact that George Floyd's death had. And like I said, a lot of people on the right very upset about this and upset anew and criticizing him, saying this is a horrible thing to say. He's actually 100% right. Now, if you look at the full context and the point he's trying to make about it, he's not right. Because he's not just saying that the death had a greater impact, he's also justifying. He thinks that it ought to have had a greater impact. And when it comes to the ought to, he's obviously wrong about that. But as an observation, he's 100% right. Like undeniably, that George Floyd's death had a greater immediate global impact than MLK's death. Now, MLK's life, of course, had a much greater impact than George Floyd's life did. George Floyd's life had no impact on society except a negative one. Had a bad impact for his community that he victimized, for the woman that he robbed at gunpoint when he forced his way into her house. I mean, it had a bad impact for them. But beyond that, it had no impact at all. I mean, his life was inconsequential. He was a violent scumbag criminal. And that's how I'll always describe anyone who forces their way into a woman's house and points a gun at them. They're all scumbags, right? So life is one thing. Life had a greater impact. But death, absolutely, George Floyd's death had a greater impact. And that only speaks to how insane the reaction to George Floyd's death was. In fact, it would be hard to think of, if you were to make a list of all of the prominent people who've died over the last century, and we're going to rank the deaths that had the greatest impact, George Floyd is in the top 3 probably. I mean, you probably got JFK, and then I think George Floyd's probably number 2. And you might even be able to make an argument for putting him at number 1. When you consider just the way that society, the meltdown, I mean, the literal meltdown that occurred across society. And the way that things were reshuffled and flipped on their heads, everything's upside down and backwards because George Floyd died. I mean, let's start with the fact that dozens of cities across the country were in flames for months. And we're still dealing with the effects of that. I mean, a total breakdown of law and order. We'll start with that. So the impact was negative from his death. It was completely maniacal and irrational and insane. But did it have a greater impact? Yeah. In fact, I think what the point he makes there, that's the point that we should be making as conservatives. We shouldn't be disagreeing with that. We should be pointing that out. Because of how crazy, it only illustrates how crazy the reaction was. Hey, listen, hit the subscribe button. Do it right now. I demand it. And I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.